Hi, I'm Jeff, and I'm here to talk to you today about how to bring empathy and intentionality into engineering your dashboards, specifically dashboards. But before we get into all that, I wanted to hopefully share a vision of a rather dystopian vision that most of us can probably empathize with on some level. But tell me about a time, or like tell me, if you've ever been woken up at 2 a.m., you're on call, or you're back up on call, or you're somewhere in the escalation path. It's early in the morning, you're totally out of it. You grab your cell phone, mute it, jump on the call, and you try to get a sense for what's going on because, until 3 minutes ago, you were in a very, very deep sleep. And you join the call and you find out that until 5 or 6 minutes ago, 4 or 5 other people were in a very, very deep sleep. And they're all also trying to figure out what's going on. All right, you're all looking at the same alert, and hopefully, you've got some idea what's going on, at least at a very high level. After a couple minutes, you check the ticket, you say, okay, this is the service, or this is the website, or this is the whatever that's broken being in very fuzzy terms. And someone jumps to a dashboard. And hopefully, they can identify really quickly roughly what the problem is, right? Some high-level problem. But they usually don't, in this dystopian world, they're like, I think this is what's going on, and think is the high-level fuzzy term that we all really hate to hear at 2 a.m. But they've got something, and they start talking about it, and they're like, I think that we should reboot this thing, or I think that there's a database connection problem, or I think maybe there might be a problem with the firewall, or the load balancer, or the whatever. And if you've got multiple engineers on the call, there might be a dissenting opinion. Someone might say, well, I think it might be this other thing, or I think it might be this, and no one's really sure. And then someone says, well, what's actually broken? Can anyone point to the metric that says what's going on? Are we having a latency spike? Are we having a database connection exhaustion? Is it an availability problem? At what point in this network stack, because there's 4 or 5 levels of network that we're talking about here, what's actually breaking? And I'm not to say we're trying to get to root cause during this nightmare, but generally speaking, we're trying to figure out at a high level what's broken so that we can actually begin to recover. And we've got these dissenting opinions, and we've got a lot of data kind of going around, but maybe no one knows. No one knows what the numbers are actually supposed to be. Someone says, look at this metric, and they hand me a metric, and I say, this is 39 milliseconds latency. Okay, what's it supposed to be? Is that bad? What does that mean? And I'm not going to stand up here and talk to you about the different ways to show data. It's really not the problem that we have in these nightmare situations. The problem is no one really knows what's going on. And then, they page in more people, and then, sure enough, the hero person, the hero engineer, joins the call, the same hero engineer that ends up joining almost every single call. And they work the logic, they work the problem. They do it out loud, they do ask for some help, but they're the ones that have that tribal knowledge that help you work through the problem to say, these are the metrics that we should be looking at in order to troubleshoot these specific parts of this issue. And then people are trying to be helpful, and they start saying, well, check out this dashboard, or check out this dashboard, or look at this metric, or look at this other metric. And they start trading dashboards around like they're trading cards or something like that. And people are discovering new things, dashboards they've never seen before, which is an entirely different problem, right? And maybe they understand how to use 10% of this dashboard, but the other 90% is metrics they've never seen before. They knew it existed, but didn't even know that there was a dashboard that contained them, right? And so now we've got total chaos. We've got more people involved that need to be involved. We're leaning way too heavy on people that are always the ones that are pushing things through to resolution. And we're discovering more and more and more that we have these dashboard assets or these metrics that people on the team didn't even know existed. Right? We've got these junk drawers on junk drawers of assets. And no one knows how to use them because no one really, because it's 2 a.m. And even in the best cases, we probably didn't know all the various problem-solving workflows because our stacks are complicated. Whether it's microservice or whether it's monolith, it doesn't really matter. Whether it's full-blown cloud native and you're doing some crazy cool Lambda step function stuff, it doesn't really matter. We're building complicated systems. And so we have to think about the differences in between the different people that are responding. We have to recognize that, yeah, I'm probably not as good as I am, as I could be during the day at 2 a.m., right? This is a distressing situation. But this sort of thing happens all the time. And the net result is we're inconsistent in our time to remediate, or time to recover, and that's in an operational case. In a long-term engineering improvement scenario, we're inconsistent in how we measure progress over time. Maybe we're not tracking to the same set of goals, or maybe we're inconsistent in even tracking to the same goal. And so that entire exercise becomes, the measuring what matters, it all kind of goes out the window because we're inconsistent in how we apply what we're doing. Right? So this nightmare super situation where that you can find a million different ways, it's everywhere. A little bit about me. I've been solving problems with dashboards for about 20 years, deep in software engineering since about the year 2000. I've done things in big tech at Amazon. I started my own consultancy in 2014. Doing a lot with containers, moving to the cloud, modernization. Half of that job, people bring you in for the technology side of things. They find you for the technology side of things. But at the end of the day, what they really come around to is that the problems that they're trying to solve are human problems. They're people problems. They are, application of technology, and you end up kind of wearing this sort of therapist hat for about 50% of the time when you're in a role like that. They have the same problems in big tech and fintech. I've worked in both. Right currently, I'm full-time employed with PayPal and Venmo as a senior principal engineer, and they've got the same problems. This is what we focus on at this level, is figuring out how to merge the technology and the human problems, or how to better solve the human problems with technology. I've written a book on Docker called Docker in Action. Again, I've been a consultant, and I speak quite a bit about this sort of intersection. And what I can tell you is that everyone has these problems. Some people have more of the problems than others, but everyone falls somewhere in this maturity spectrum, right? And so at the end of the day, I've seen a lot of these companies. I've worked with a huge number of groups of people. And generally, we are all, no one is out there building dashboards with malice in their heart, right? We all generally want the same things. We want to be able to understand what's happening right now and over time. We want to be able to have confidence that our systems or our processes or our business is working as intended, that something's not broken, right? And that we can identify quickly what is broken if something is broken, or that we can see that the work that we're doing is actually driving the change that we intend to affect. And we want to be able to understand a huge amount of information in aggregate very, very quickly, and we need to be able to do that visually. And so we turn to the dashboard, and we have this, easy to dashboards are so easy to romanticize. We think of visual, just really amazing, easy to geek out over visuals like you'd see in Tron or other movies, things that are just super beautiful. And we're just yeah, the dashboard, it's easy to get enthusiastic about. And you see these beautiful, you walk through the AWS Expo Hall, and you'll see these amazing, dashboarding and data and metrics companies, and they'll have gorgeous dashboards to show you. And you'll be like, that's what I need. It's beautiful. I like looking at it. I think I can understand it, until you actually walk up to it. So this is what we think about. This is what we want to build. It's something, this vision. And we plan for it with something like a Jira task that looks like this. And it just says, create your dashboards. And that's about it. Because you know you need a dashboard, you want a dashboard, but when you're actually building your product, you spend a lot more time thinking about the product. How's this thing going to work? How's it going to break? What are we going to do? Is it working correctly? You're doing your testing. You're doing all these other things that seem way higher up in the value chain than the dashboards, but you know you need them. So you slap that ticket in there and you say, I'm sure one of the people on the team will figure it out, and they'll build some dashboards, and everything will be great. And then you end up with something like this. And this is an amazing dashboard. This is a literal dashboard. But I would bet a lot of money that there are very few people in this room who know what this dashboard is from or could use it effectively at 2 a.m., let alone right now in the middle of the day. But the thing about this dashboard is, and the thing that makes it confusing, especially to the non-specialist eye, is you've got data kind of everywhere. There's nothing linear about it. There's no context, spatial relevance that you can tell quickly, right? You got a bunch of gauges, got a bunch of information, and it is using the space to its fullest extent, right? It's a very physical dashboard, and you'll see dashboards just like this if you go down to the expo hall and look at hey, look at all my MySQL metrics. Great, right? It'll be super vertical, super horizontal. You might even scroll horizontally, which is like my worst nightmare. And there's no sense in how to navigate this thing. They'll be like the numbers will be brought together more around like similarity in purpose rather than relevance for anything specific, right? And you'll see dashboards that just says, I want all my JVM metrics on the same dashboard. And you can do that. And maybe if you're a hyper specialist and you know the app in a very, very deep way, or you're a super Java specialist, or you're a super whatever specialist, that might actually be usable to you. But on any given occasion, a very small portion of the data on that dashboard will be useful to you. And if you hand that to a person who's new on your team, or who's just rotated on, or who's helping someone from another team, and say, here you go, what's wrong? They won't even know where to start, right? But if you are a specialist, if you do know what this thing is, maybe it's helpful. So my thesis, my big, bold statement, is that your dashboards have to do more than visualize or aggregate data. It can't just be a metric discovery system. There are better metric discovery systems, right? Your dashboards have to facilitate, and they have to teach, not just teach other people. The dashboards you build should teach you, because I promise, 3 weeks after you build the dashboard, you will forget what you were doing. It's just like code, right? This is for bringing consistency, not just across your team, but consistency with each individual when they go to use the thing. And so this is all about using the tool, dashboarding, which there are a great number of fantastic tools out there. I'm not going to pitch you any one tool. They're all great. It really comes down to how you use them these days. And so we're going to do that by bringing intentionality and empathy, empathizing with the people who are going to use the dashboard and going a little bit beyond. But before we have to do that, before we can even begin to do that, we have to recognize and acknowledge a couple things. First, that the user's inconsistent. I'm inconsistent. I'm inconsistent today. The number of ways that I've done this presentation is amazing, right? But I'm just getting up here speaking. And the same thing goes for each person as they're responding to an incident, or as they are going through to reflect on their, their performance, their system's performance in the grander scheme of things, or compare performance, or as they're solving most problems. We're inconsistent in our practices. and that different people have different backgrounds and experience. You know, like that's sort of an obvious one. A person who's been on the team for 3 weeks is going to have a very, very different perspective than someone who's built the product and has been supporting it for 3 years. But we want to be able to bring people up to speed quickly, right? That's why we've got someone else on our team, is to help us distribute that workload, become more effective as a group. And so we have to acknowledge that people are different. People have different backgrounds, they have different levels of experience, and that we have to acknowledge that a dashboard is going to be used in suboptimal occasions, like at 2 a.m. And that experience consistency is often more important than any other optimization. It doesn't matter if your time to recovery was 5 minutes last night, if the night before it was 2 hours, right? And if the workflows and problem-solving methods that you used to address it last night were completely different than the ones that you used the night before, where it was 2 hours. Because until you can get consistency in what you're doing, it's actually impossible to optimize these things. So the first step in fixing this whole problem is empathizing with the user, right? And there's a few things that you have to ask yourself. Once you've acknowledged these, axiomatic problems with human systems, we have to begin empathizing with the user, with the people. Who are they? What's their role? What's their background? Acknowledge these things. When you're building a dashboard, what problems are they going to need to solve? Are they incident response? Are they driving larger, longer-term engineering goals? Are they customer support? Are you performance optimization? Things like that. What context will those people need in order to succeed beyond what you might think of in metrics? These are there goals associated with it, with this number or with these numbers? Are there upper and lower thresholds to expected performance? Are we tracking, like if it is an incident response type dashboard, what are the levels of criticality to these incidents, right? Like how are we measuring these things? What common misconceptions might they have, right? And we have to account for those, and we have to be very intentional about making sure that we've cataloged and understand those misconceptions. What research would they need to do in order to understand the problem? And really this is a little bit of a roll-up. This is all about research, right? The things that we need to know in order to solve a problem. We need to do it. We can do it now because we're building the dashboard. Better now than later. And then how do they actually solve the problem? What, observe people. How are they doing these things? Understand the workflows to solve the problem. And once we know these things, once we've empathized with them, we should actually think about that dumb Jira ticket that just says create dashboards. And I'm not going to stand up here and preach some specific methodology for creating user stories, because we're all inconsistent, and we're all very, very different and have different contexts and backgrounds. But something even as simple as this, right, where all we've done is identify a chief persona, tells you so much more about what you're being asked to build as a service operator, as a product owner, as a developer. Right? We can already begin, without any explicit problem statements, begin to understand what we're trying to do so that we can build better solutions to those problems, better tools by the way of dashboards. So here's a very lightweight framework for bringing intention to these things. We want to gather the objectives. What are these people trying to do? Right? What is the purpose of this dashboard? And it's okay to have, you should have purpose dashboards. Don't make the mistake of trying to create the grand unified dashboard for your service. No one will be able to read it. 2, what context do they need in order to solve the problem? What workflow should they follow consistently? Think runbook style, but with a little bit less writing involved, right? Like, how do you actually solve this? What information do you need to know at what point? And once you know that, what do you do now? How do you act? And then we roll this up into a two-phase implementation, right? Context, objective, and workflow, these are all research work in the framework. There's two actions. One, build dashboards that teach and encourage consistency. Answer the next question because you know what the next question is with information. Teach. The second one is usage, and we'll get to that in a minute. So objectives. Again, I already listed off a couple. The first thing we want to do when we're building out our user stories is catalog what problems you're solving with the dashboard, capacity planning, monitoring and spend, progress reporting, incident response. These are just a handful of these things, but really like take some time when you see that ticket come through or when you're writing the ticket to ask yourself, what are we doing and why are we doing it? I threw just a whole handful of potential context that you should be aware of when you are the person solving the problem with the dashboard. And we need to identify that as dashboard creators because we can use that in our dashboards. So for example, what other technical assets do we have? Maybe we've got specific artifacts, whether those are links to your code repos or they're links to Docker images or they're links to other dashboards. What do we have? What do we have to solve the problem? What escalation paths do we have? If I don't solve something if I don't recover within 15 minutes, am I supposed to escalate to someone? If I see that there's a problem with another service, how do I escalate to that team to get their attention? What are the relationships between the thing that you own or the problem that you're solving and other things that might be broken? What events, time-based things, like was there a deployment 15 minutes ago? Are we in the middle of our peak? Understand these things. There's a couple more there. The next piece is workflow, right? Focusing in on your problem-solving flows. First and biggest question, is there a problem? This seems kind of obvious, but, and usually at the beginning of an incident, it's a little bit more obvious than it is at the end. I ask, is there a problem? Not because I need to know, was I just paged? I know I was paged. I need to be able to answer that question with high confidence so that I can know when I'm done, right? To know whether or not we've recovered. And then secondarily, whether or not it's just going to fail again in 5 minutes. Am I going to be woken back up? How long should I wait? These are the kinds of things that we need to know at 3 a.m. after we've been up for an hour. Do I need to stay up till 4? Can we go back to sleep now? What's the impact? We shouldn't have to guess about this at 2 a.m., right? Like, we should be encoding our goals. If we do have clear metrics for assessing impact, if we have specific impact statements, then get that information and we're going to encode it into the system. Like, the dashboard should just tell you what the impact is. We shouldn't have to guess. We shouldn't have to rely on someone on the call knowing what the answer is. We should just know it, right? And be consistent in when we ask these things. The next thing to think about when you're assessing workflow is what data to use at what point in your problem solving. If I get paged, what's the probability that the first metric I should check is the number of concurrent database connections? Now, maybe I have a little bit of personal experience that says, hey, that's probably the thing because I've been woken up for it every night this week. But in the general case, but that's a fatigue problem, right? I'm subverting workflow, sensible workflow, because I have experience, because I'm tired, because I've been worn out as a component in this human system, trained to do something that is otherwise unnatural. The first thing I should ask myself is, What's the nature of the failure? What are my top line metrics, right? Am I unavailable? Am I having a latency spike? What's going on? And so produce those top line metrics first. Show them, hey, this is the number that the alarm is based on. Here's the thing right here. You can see the last, whatever, hour. You can see the thresholds, et cetera. Once we've identified whether or not there's a problem and the nature of the problem, we move down to the next level, right? And again, these are semi-arbitrary examples because people have different workloads out there. As a service owner, the next best thing that I ask myself is, okay, my service is impact. Are any of my dependencies down? Right? Because this is the first big out, right? If one of my dependencies are down, then I know I should stop triaging and escalate to one of those teams or go looking for a related ticket, right? So the next thing that I want to see are my dependency metrics. And then once we get further and further down, that's where you get into the finer and finer grained detail to understand maybe not root cause, but to the point where you can get to a course of action to recover. And that's the final bit, the launch points, right? In your workflow, when you're problem solving, what do you do? What are you gonna do? Like we all do, we didn't just go to the dashboard to like look at it. We're there to figure out what comes next. What do we need to do in order to go back to sleep? What do we need to do in order to recover? That might be a deeper investigation. It might be some specific, some jump point to another, visibility or observability system. Or it might be actually doing something. Now's the time to reboot the service. Now's the time to, communicate with another stakeholder. These types of things. But we have to know what those are first, right? This is all research that we as the people building the dashboards need to do ahead of time. Once we've got all that collected, right, and we could put together that hypothetical better user story. Now it's time to take that knowledge and to actually teach. Teach not yourself, but you're teaching, well, potentially yourself, you're teaching the people who are actually going to use the dashboard, right? You're encoding that context. What are my thresholds? What are the relevant events? What are, who supports what, when, where, why? You're encoding that into your actual dashboard, right? And you do that, you're encoding the workflows, top to bottom, by use of hierarchy. To say, what's the first thing I want? I want to be able to look at this top down, right? We don't want people to have to know where to look in the page first. They're always going to look at the top first and let it flow down. The next piece is you've got all this huge context, but you want to bring that into the area where it's most appropriate. Don't at the very, very top have jump points for, rebooting the system before you even know whether or not that's the appropriate thing. Actually bring text, bring links. Use those text blocks that you can do in almost all dashboarding software these days and put it right next to the gauge or right next to the line chart or whatever it is that says that there's a problem. And if there's a problem, here's where you go. Right there next to it. You can put it anywhere, put it right there next to it. Just gonna make everything way easier, right? We want to eliminate excuses by telling people what to do next because they shouldn't have to invent it at 2 a.m. Shouldn't have to do the research at 2 a.m. We've got all the time in the world while we're building it. Use it. Make the thing better. And this is way better than runbooks. Like, don't get me wrong, I like runbooks. But you don't have to write anything out, right? We can put the data right there and teach with the data. Use the horizontal lines, use the thresholds, use the vertical lines to indicate events. And encode your exit points right there, right? If you say, this is the point in the workflow where if you've identified that as a third-party dependency, here's the thing to do. Put a link, either a link to another dashboard or a link to a pager button, anything like that. Now, once you've got this dashboard, right, you've taught, you've encoded all that context, you've encoded all the workflow into that dashboard, which really is, it's a little bit hand-wavy, but it's also about as simple as it gets, right? Just we want to be intentional about the problem we're solving and the work and the flows that we would use. Once you've got the dashboard, you're not done, because one of the biggest problems is people trading those dashboards in these events, right? We want to make sure that we are linking, that our dashboards are discoverable, and that we are tying the ceremony, whether it's an ops review or it's a page or any other thing, it's a meeting invite, something like that, that we can actually get to that into the dashboard as simple as possible. We don't want it, I shouldn't have to page my backup in order to ask, hey, where's that dashboard that you were using the other day because it was great and it actually helped you solve the problem. If I get paged, it should be in the page. It should be as close to the inescapable ceremony as possible. And so we want to enshrine these things into our meeting invites, into our alarms, goal documents, whatever it is. And once you're there, you can actually begin to use it. So here's just an example dashboarding user story, right? And again, I'm not advocating that you write super in-depth or formal user stories. But as a service operator, I want to identify and verify service failures so that I can take recovery actions. It's a fairly obvious thing for people who have done these before. It's important to write it down because that alone is way better than create dashboard. We can go on to say, I will arrive at this dashboard by way of a link in an alarm. I'll need to understand the impact of the alarm, the high level of malfunction, alarming severity criteria, the criteria themselves, and any other related events to the change. I need to be able to identify if any system dependencies are malfunctioning. I need to be able to quickly identify if any known failure modes are occurring. Known failure modes being the operative word here. If we know that it can fail some way, let's go ahead and figure out how we would identify that ahead of time and put that into our workflow that we can encode in the dashboard. And I need to be able to discover those lower level metrics, those deeper triage things, and fall back to, in our worst case scenarios, situations where we need to go back to discovering metrics real time. So here's just an example, right, of a real dashboard. As a service operator, I want to quickly identify if a given service is meeting its health objectives, right? Make sure I got the right button. So here we've got our standard, very, very common top 3 major metrics. The amount of latency, our throughput, and availability. We've got our real time, or our average P90s across the bottom, which, if it was just the number, wouldn't tell you very much, but we've got a big green light here, a big yellow light in the middle, and a big green light. Very quickly identify, very, very quickly, this is the top of the dashboard, this is something I should be looking at. When you look at it a little bit closer, we have horizontal lines indicating alarming thresholds. Right? This is very, very quickly can help me identify when something passed over a threshold. It's all about eliminating excuses. All of this pre-work that we're talking about here is about eliminating excuses for variability when we need consistency. Alternatively, as an engineering manager, I might want to quickly identify if a given service is meeting its SLOs and discover the responsible parties and related information. In this example, we've got the metrics that are a little bit more tailored to measuring performance over a longer period of time. Are we trending in the right direction? Are we actually going to meet our goals? We have error budgets. We have targets, clearly stating the goals right there on the page. I don't need to say, I don't need to do the hard work of divining what the current number is over here, referring back over to some document that maybe I know about, but that 75% of my peers probably have no idea exists. If it's all in one place, We already know about it. Everyone who looks at this knows what our goals are. Everyone who looks at it knows what our budget is. And what's next? If we do have a problem, I very specifically know what to do. I can dive deeper. I can use the dashboard as a launch point. It doesn't just have to be a single pane of glass. It can be something that we're interacting with. It should be tied together. Promote discoverability for these other assets. Otherwise, a very small portion of your local population will be able to benefit from them. So kind of on the other side of this, like after I work with a team, sit through one of those nightmares, you can pull them together and say, that was fun, wasn't it? And they'll almost universally say, I really hate being on call. And that's fine. And then we can say, well, we have the ability to do something about it. Let's act with intention. And so on the other side of this, you end up with a story that looks like, hey, I got paged last night at 2 a.m. Woke up, fumbled with my VPN token, had to type my PIN 3 times because I only had one eye open. I joined, opened up my email. There was a link. I clicked the link related to the alarm, and it took me straight to the dashboard. The alarm said something along the lines of availability drop. I looked at the dashboard, saw right at the top, yep, we've got a number in the red. It's a SEV3, or it's a SEV2, and definitely a pageable offense. It's been this way for the last 10 minutes, and it doesn't show any signs of improving. It's not a full failure, though. We're only at 78% available when but anything below 80 is SEV2. And I know that because it says it right here. Okay, great, we've got an availability problem. Next step down. Let my eyes fall a few inches because they're gonna fall anyway, I'm dead tired. And we've identified, hey, I have a dependency failure. Our SMS service is not responding, our SMS gateway. And it's resulting in 500s. Great, what do I do about it? Well, there's a link right next to this that says, check related events for the SMS service, right? But I was able to determine right away, not only was it the SMS service that we're having an availability problem with, but it was not our database. It was not the blob storage gateway. It was not any of our networking layers, right? But they're all right there. I've got sparkline charts for it, maybe. And so I was able to immediately say, hey, click this link. Sure enough, there's already a ticket. I'm able to go to it. I don't need to search, I'll just go to it. And it says, hey, they've already been paged. The on-calls are working on it. And now I've got a stream of comments to check in on. But because I'm a good citizen, I want to let them know that I'm impacted. I leave it a comment of my own, says, hey, this service is having a problem as well. We have ticket dependency on you. We'll be monitoring for availability. Great. It's a quick story. I didn't need to know that was a dependency, right? And the person who joined my team 2 weeks ago didn't need to go through a whole bunch of onboarding training in order to learn that was a dependency, right? If they get paged at 2 a.m., they'll be able to do the exact same identification as I would, and I've been there for 3 years, right? That's fantastic. It also means when they are on call, they won't have to page me in as backup because they don't know what's going on or because they can't figure it out. It also means that they will be able to do it in the same 5-minute period as I would instead of sitting on it for 15 minutes, figuring out they have no idea what's going on, paging me, waiting 5 minutes for me to join, et cetera, and then walk through the sage knowledge. In this situation, there is no lone hero engineer on call that's going to come in and join every single call to figure it out. Your known failure modes, which do fail, hopefully, are going to be in the vast majority. And if you have known failure modes, you should have known recovery patterns. And if you can encode those into your dashboard, we can help everyone discover how to recover, not discover how to detect problems, when you're done, and how to recover. We can eliminate that variability in one place that we know everyone will go looking, which is the dashboard. That's about it. Now, it's pretty hand-wavy, but there's not a lot of magic to this. Again, there's no big technology shift here. We've had technology to help us with observability and with visualization, observability, and dashboarding for years. For the last decade, this has been, in open source. The problems we have today are not technological problems. They're 100% taking application of the technology seriously to solve the real human problems. And so, as engineers who are tasked with building these things, often for your own benefit, this is where we get to live a little bit closer to the product side of the house. We have to ask ourselves, what are the human problems? What am I trying to do? What do I wish I had written down and just presented to me at 2 a.m.? Right? How can I help drive consistency in this space? Because I don't want to be the hero engineer that gets paged in for every incident. Right? This is where we get to solve real human problems. There's no magic wand. There's no highly repeatable solution. There's no auto-generation wizard that is ever going to get this, because every team is a little bit different. Every stack is a little bit different. Every problem-solving workflow is going to be a little bit different. And so it isn't super hard. Everyone in the room can do it. We just have to take a little bit of time, practice a little bit of empathy, and a little bit of intentionality when we're planning for this kind of work. And we can all get to great operations. I have helped several teams through the exact same type of reflection. So if you've got painful on calls, if you have goals that you have no idea whether or not you're tracking to them, if you're unsure whether or not you're going to have the right capacity plan or the right capacity for the next 6 months, or if you're unsure at what point in time your needs change, it's time to build a dashboard. But be intentional about the problem you're solving. Consider these things. That's all I've got. We'll open it up to Q&A for the remaining 15 minutes. Thanks. So there's no one running around with microphones, but if anyone has a question, just go ahead and shout it out and I'll repeat it. Yep.
So you can't predict all failures, right? So in a new system, how much is it reactionary and how much is it just trying to scale or improve?
It's a really good question. So the question, and correct me if I mess this up, you can't always predict all kinds of failures. Absolutely not, especially in new systems, right? You're not sure how it's going to fail. And so is this process something that is a one-time deal, or is this something that we expect to evolve? And it's like everything else, especially new things. Take an iterative approach. Don't plan on these things ever being done, especially if you're talking about something like in service operations or incident response. It'll never be done, right? We're always reacting to evolutions in the system. Obviously, there's a little bit more iteration that happens at the beginning of a project because you're just getting your feet wet with it, right? So definitely, but overall, the process and the problems to solve are fairly predictable. The failure modes might be different if you're talking about an incident response dashboard. But at a high level, the workflow that you use to do the problem solving is going to be similar, right? Is there a problem? What are the high level things that we do know about that we can identify quickly in a handful of metrics, right? What are the best metric to identify there? Throw that up. And generally speaking, the things that we know about, like especially early in the workflow, should have really nice, easy exit points where we can jump out. Things like checking your service dependencies, right? Is AWS down? Right? Like, if you're in Amazon. This is a really easy one to check. Well, it's not as easy as it should be. But it's the first one we probably want to, make sure, can we even get to our service, right? But generally speaking, the workflows are going to be similar. And it's the details that we were going to learn about and fill in over time. Because again, especially if you're talking about something new, you might not have that many assets to jump in with, right? You might not have other dashboards. You might not have good, strong partners. You might not have established escalation paths. But through this exercise, if nowhere else, you'll be really clear what you don't have. You should probably, have a conversation about when it's appropriate to add those things. Does that make sense? We should never be really, I want to lean into don't think of these things as done. And nothing is ever going to be perfect whenever you're dealing with human systems, right? Ask yourself frequently, ask your peers frequently, ask the people who are using the dashboards frequently, hey, how did that work out last time? Was there something that you didn't have available that would have made things better? That would have either made things more consistent or faster? Is there something that is never useful? We might add modes. It might be totally reasonable to remove failure modes. If this one thing never happens, ever, move it way, 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 way down. Get it out of the way. Make room for the things that we use, right? And we want to tweak it all the time. Yeah. Don't, especially in service land, the job's never done. You got new people coming on the team. After a person's first on call, ask them, how did it go? Look at how long it took them to solve the problem. Ask them if they had a hard time finding an answer to a question, or even discovering what the questions should be. Now, that's the great part of the other half of the teach piece, right? It's not, did they get what they knew that they needed quickly? It's discovering the questions they should ask next, which is usually the thing that takes more experience to pick up over time. So if we can shortcut that by just making a dashboard that people can just read, that's a huge secondary benefit. Anything else? Go over here first. The objective slide. Objectives. Another one over here. Do I think Datadog is the best tool for creating dashboards? I've used a lot. I've used a lot of tools. And they're all yes and no. It really comes down to the right tool for me is really what the team is familiar with. I don't know, I can't say objectively and outside of any specific context whether or not Datadog is the right thing. I think that they've got a really great competitive offering in that space, and they've seen a lot of evolution over the years and iteration. They definitely put a lot of time and energy into thinking about it, but a lot of the companies do, right? And so if you're a Datadog customer and that's where your data is, it's definitely the best tool for you. But I probably wouldn't make a purchasing decision on the dashboarding capabilities alone. At the end of the day, there's so little difference. All of this is the technology, again, is commoditized as far as I'm concerned, right? There's different people doing a little bit of new stuff in different arenas. But there will never be a great substitution for thinking about the problem, like an engineer, thinking about the humans, and building something that actually solves your problem, right? You can build fantastic dashboards as long as you have like a graphing tool with a wiki. When I was at Amazon in 2012, 2011, that's exactly what we did. Our dashboards were all in MediaWiki or something like that, right? So you don't need much. You just, the most important thing, again, is focusing on that problem. Does that answer your question? Okay.
How do you balance source of truth in the dashboard versus like some confluence page somewhere?
That's a good question. Question was, how do you balance source of truth between the dashboard where you're now encoding information versus some Confluence page or some other document that lives somewhere else, right? And that's a hard problem too. A different kind of distributed state hard problem. But I mean, and this is, if it's not, if you've changed something, if you've updated some information or updated a goal or set different thresholds, something like that, something that would actually be encoded into one of these dashboards, if those changes are not embedded into the tools that you're using to solve problems, they haven't been completed yet, right? If it's not in the dashboard, if it's not in the place where you're doing the work, it's not done. And so, hopefully you're using some kind of like document-driven, change, especially for things like goals, whether or not you're rewriting a policy or you're vetting another idea that you have. Hopefully you're writing it down somewhere. But once you've written it down and encoded it, there's a whole slew of work that goes into updating your other operational systems, whether that's your ticketing system or your monitors and alarms, and your dashboard, if those are things that you're talking about. I use dashboards for all sorts of things that have nothing to do with incident response. When we're doing, I love using dashboards as a way to organize, engineering operations meetings, right? So rather than having someone stand up and just like read a bunch of stats or a bunch of people just talk or someone write a doc, I'd vastly prefer have a dashboard that has been configured to show like the last 8 or 9 weeks of performance for different. I'm a microservices guy, so and generally work with a lot of those teams. So like, hey, let's roll up these services into their ownership structures, and then we'll just go down the list. Say, how did this group of service do this in this last 2 weeks? Is it trending up or down? Is it on track to meet goals for the year or not? And if everything's green, great, don't have anything to say. We don't really need to talk about it. If something is trending down or it's yellow or it's red, great, I'm gonna turn to the owner and say, what's going on over here in service Z land, right? And again, like we can talk about really like this picture here really is like, it's a real dashboard, right? And this is exactly something that I would use in a situation like that, except it wouldn't just be one of these things. You'd see, 50 of them, one right below the other. And like, why deal with the logistics of running a round table in a meeting when you can just read the thing top to bottom as a group? Everyone can access it. The service owners can read it before the meeting to know whether or not they're going to have something to talk about in this session and do some preparation. So I want to emphasize, we talked a lot about like incident response and things like that, but dashboards are not just for that. They're anywhere where you want to mash up information and aggregate and visualize data. right? There's no point in measuring what matters if you don't review the measurements and hold yourself and your team and your organization accountable to the performance and figure out how to move forward, like reduce variability and figure out how to improve. Any other questions? You're all here, which is pretty impressive considering I think the keynote is going on right now. So it's clearly something that you care about in one way or another, either because you're working through it, you've experienced some pain, or because you know that traditionally these things are kind of crazy. Raise your hand for me if you describe, I'll see if I can see, if you describe having seen, like your dashboard junk drawers before. Either a dashboard that's just kind of got all the metrics in the world on it, or one of those situations where you've got like 1,000 dashboards and you're not really sure what any of them do and people trade them around like trading cards. Go ahead and raise your hand if that's a situation you've experienced. That's pretty much everybody. It's super common, right? And like, it's not something to feel guilty about either. It's a really, really hard problem. It's not a pure engineering problem. This requires, it's more akin to what people do in the product space, right? Like understanding those like behavioral problems, reflecting on processes, trying to drive consistency. And everyone everywhere and every organization I've ever talked to has room to improve. There's some really great ones out there, right? But this is an everybody problem. Like we can all get better, and you're never done. Like we talked about earlier, there's always something you can tweak to get better, to either get more consistency or to react to fresh changes, because most of us don't have static systems either, right? There's always something to do. We're changing it, which means we've got to reflect it in our documentation, and we have to reflect it in our operational tools. So it's something we all care about, and it's going to take effort on all of our parts to make sure we're holding ourselves accountable for avoiding that create dashboards ticket. Thanks a lot for your time. Have a good day.